Hi everybody, my name's Noel. I'm doing another lecture on synergetics and nuclear structure. Today I'm going to explain one of the biggest mysteries in physics. We'll resolve that today for you. Right now there's a huge mystery, and the mystery is where's all the mass? A long time ago the physicists understood that the charge of the electron and the charge of the proton were identical. One had an electric charge of this many coulombs and one had a positive charge. Later, though, when they found out in their Large Hadron Colliders that the masses, here, let me explain what. When you add an electron to a proton, you create a neutron with a neutral charge. The charges are identical, so they neutralize themselves. But when you add an electron to a proton, you don't get the mass of the neutron. You're still 1.5 electron masses short, approximately. There's no mystery about the missing mass. There's a mystery about the missing model, which will explain how and why, when we add 1 to 1836, we do arrive at 1838.5. The mass of the electron plus the mass of the proton does equal the mass of the neutron. The way we understand that is because we understand synergy, and synergy means the behavior of whole systems unidentified by the behavior of the individual parts. Our scientists are trying to understand the individual parts, and then they're adding them up together to try and get the other parts, and they're noticing that their math doesn't work. I'm going to explain a model in just a moment. I want to also explain just real briefly that John Lilly, he was an explorer of the mind, and he said that what is believed to be true is true, or it becomes true within limits to be found experimentally and experientially. He says these limits are further beliefs which need to be transcended, for in the province of the mind there are no limits. Now, if we can expand our minds and take a new perspective on things, we might be able to understand that other models can explain the mysteries of nuclear physics better than the models which they're currently using. A model based on the 6 axes of the isotopic vector matrix is capable of ratioing the mass of the neutron, the proton, and the electron along with Planck's constant and the fine structure constant in whole rational units using only basic mathematics. You'll notice if you take 0.511, the mass of the electron, and multiply it by its ratio, 1836.152, you get the mega electron voltage or mass of the proton. Same thing with the multiplying 0.511 times 1838.683, we derive 939.57. When I first started learning nuclear physics, I read a book by Frank Close. He told us it's a big mystery how the proton's mass is exactly 938.4 mega electron volts. You'll notice that's a little bit off from today's standard. They change a little bit as code data comes out every 4 years. If you round gently and take out 0.152 and take out 0.183, to derive 1838.5 and 1836. You'll notice that 0.511 multiplied by the proton's ratio and the neutron's ratio derive very close approximations to science's current numbers, and closer approximations than the 0.13 that Frank Close was off when he wrote his book 938.4, where he says 938.4 is the mega electron volts. So I think I'm within close approximations here. Now let me go ahead and explain about what synergy is. The behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of the parts. 1 plus 1 is 2. That's how we got taught in school. But 1 plus 1, depending on what you're adding in the behavior of the system, could equal 4, 6, 10, 14, or 15. Let me explain. Let's say I take one triangle, and I add another triangle to it. Let's say it's smaller, and I add it to the inside. The behavior of the system just created 1 plus 1 equals 4. You'll see the 4 triangles. Let's say that we add movement to the system and time. Thank you for your patience. So you've got the 4 triangles, but if they can move on their dihedral edges, they can flip into a tetrahedron. So 1 plus 1 is equal to 1 tetrahedron, or 1 plus 1 is equal to 4 vertexes, or 6 edge lengths, or 6 edge lengths plus 4 vertexes for 10, or add 4 faces for 14, add a volume inside for 15. I'm not trying to be silly. I'm trying to explain how the behavior of the whole system is not identified by the behavior of the individual parts. Currently we're using Large Hadron Colliders to find the missing mass. Adding neutrinos and positrons to the electron and the proton still does not get us to the neutron's mass. pi mesons, lambda mesons, all these other kinds of things we're trying to discover. So let me explain then real basically a geometrical model based on the isotopic vector matrix. You'll notice there are square planes, one on the edge, one in the middle, and one on the other end. There are three sets of these. There are also hexagons. See if I get that. So there's one hexagon here. There's four hexagons. One here. Four central hexagonal planes made of closest packed spheres, and 6 planes which are square made of closest packing unit radius spheres. When you take spheres and you closest pack them, you take one and you pack 6 around the outside and start creating a hexagonal shape. Then you pack 12 around the 6, then 18 around the 12, and then 24 around the 18. You keep adding 6 each time. After you've added a total of 17 layers, you have a total of 919 spheres on the hexagonal plane. Within that shape called the vector equilibrium, which is also called the cube octahedron, and in the other videos I've shown how it represents a torus and how the movement of the vectors express both linear and angular momentum. When you take the square, you'll notice that you have a square with one sphere, and then 4 wrap around the 1, 8 wrap around the 4, then 12 go around, 12 go around the 8, 16 go around the 12, and you keep adding 4 each time. As soon as you've added 17 layers on the square, you have 613 total spheres. 16 spheres on 6 total planes equals 1839 times 2. 919 spheres on the hexagonal planes times 4 planes is 1838 times 2. The average of 1838 and 1839 is 1838.5. There's your neutron's mass. When you see the dynamics of the process and you understand that the electron field is also the central sphere, when the electron combines with the proton to create the neutron, every time that the electron enters in and takes the place of the central sphere, either the hexagons or the squares cannot use that central sphere because it's being used by one or the other. So when the central sphere is being used as the hexagon and it's flashing here, these planes are not using the sphere, and they're flashing 612 times 3 times 2, or 1836 times 2, the proton's value. When this is using the central sphere, when the squares are using the central sphere, this is flashing 918 times 4 is 1836 times 2, so the proton. So you're getting proton, 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 proton flashes and neutron, neutron, neutron at the same intermittent flashing. That's why when the electron leaves the system, you still have a proton at 918 and 918. Proton lasts almost forever, right? Billions of years. Neutron lasts, what, 10 or 15 minutes? That helps to explain it. Helps to explain why when we add one electron with this charge to one proton with this charge, we have neutron, neutral charge. And the masses all make sense without having to find other particles to make up the lost mass. Do you see how the universe has a metric or model or system of measurement which is capable of ratioing the masses of the electron, the proton, and the neutron in a whole rational units, and explains why the charges do neutralize themselves in this one dynamic. Now, what's beautiful about this is what it turns into. Now, you have 919 spheres on the hexagon and 613 on the square. If you take the 919 of the hexagon and the 613 of the square and you multiply the number of planes, you get 3676 and 3678. You add them together, you get 7354. This is the neutron times 4. If you multiply these two numbers together, you get this number here. That's the neutron times 2 to the second power minus 1. When you multiply these two numbers together and divide by 2, you get the total number of vectors in the 3676 frequency tetrahedron. This number, which is this number multiplied this number, equals Planck's constant times 10 to the 40 plus the inverse of the fine structure constant times 10 to the third minus the mass of the proton multiplied by the mass of the neutron times 4. And this transforms itself and is equal to the mass of the neutron times 2 to the second power minus the mass of the electron times Planck's constant times 10 to the 37th power plus the fine structure constant times 10 to the 5th divided by 2. Now, if you would like to tell me that all of this is just one big coincidence, I'd be happy to say, well, that's fine with me because it doesn't really matter to me. It matters to the future of mankind. I do not think that I'll ever profit off this, so it's a lot of time and energy on my part trying to explain this to people because I care, because I think it's important. You'll notice then also that we derive the fine structure constant by taking a very close approximation of the proton's mass added to the neutron's mass as measured in hundreds of thousands of electron volts, and you get this number here. The inverse of the second root of that number is the fine structure constant. That's the same as when you take this number, this number here, and divide it by the total amount of angular variation. This is the second point of the zero. This is the second 0 point of my quanta scale, also called the neutron scale. When you divide it by the total amount of angular variation on the surface of the tetrahedron, you get basically the same number, the inverse of the second root of the fine structure constant. Another fine coincidence is that the proton's rest energy has a kinetic energy of 17 electron volts, which is what this all stems from. Just real briefly then, because there are 3 scales associated with the work, I just want to explain real quickly how, don't fall please, how you take the 2 points, 6, the 5th point of my pen scale divided by the first 0 point of my quanta scale leaves a ratio difference of 0.000544. That's the atomic mass unit of the electron. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. Please feel free to watch the others. I'm not sure how many more lectures I'll be doing. Thanks again, you guys.